Good evening and welcome to Truth and Justice TV. I'm Jennifer Obaseki and today we're going to be talking all about harmful traditional practices. Now some of you may say, why are you going to be talking about those things? And the reason is, well, we celebrated International Women's Day and today we're going to be talking about things that affect women and girls adversely and why some of you who may inadvertently be engaging in these practices need to be careful because many of them are actually criminal offences. So first of all, we're going to be talking about one that affects both Asian and African cultures dominantly, but also women and girls all around the world, and that's arranged marriages. So there's a difference between arranged and forced. So when a union of a man and a woman come together, normally we celebrate such things. But when it's a situation where it's arranged and it's arranged against one of the parties' wills, their own desires, then it's really moving into the realms of forced marriage. It might not necessarily be a case of overt threats, but these threats could be subliminal. There could be conditions put in place if you don't marry, if you don't go through with the ceremony, etc. Then it moves into that territory of being a forced marriage. And once again, back in the day, there used to be matchmakers, many different traditions within various different diaspora groups, cultures, had very similar practices. Somebody that made family introductions, someone that paired couples. But today, it's all about enabling each party give their own willing consent to the union. In some cultures, it's still very common play for there to be arrangements, an arranged marriage, but when this is done with consent, then there is no illegality. So it all boils down to that magic word of consent. Whether somebody willfully agrees to, one, the arrangements being made, and two, committing to that person in the ceremony. And of course, we have different types of marriage ceremonies that take place. There are even marriage ceremonies that take place over the phone, yes, in some cultures. But again, in the UK, for a marriage to be recognised, the parties either have to have a level of introduction. It might not even be a physical introduction, but they should be an introduction. And if they haven't met, you have to really explain how and why the marriage should be recognised as lawful. But normally, for it to be recognised in the UK, the couple must have met. But there are exceptions, and there are, again, practices whereby couples are introduced and they're unable to meet each other physically before the arrangements can be made. But it all comes down to evidence, and it all comes down to what is deemed acceptable within the law. And what happens if you feel somebody is at risk of a forced marriage? Or what can you do to protect somebody who's at risk of a forced marriage? Luckily, the UK has now really had reviews, really from 2015, on how to ensure there's legislation to protect women and girls. This has been due to a number of quite high-profile cases where you've seen people actually have to be rescued from abroad when they've been taken abroad and almost forced into marriages that they had no consent to be involved in. And we've seen this happen within India, Pakistan, Somalia, and various other countries, I might add. It's not just a practice that's stuck within the Asian and African countries, but also within European countries we see this happening. So what you can do is there is a ability to petition the court. And who can petition the court? It's not necessarily a relative or a friend. It can be an organisation. And the court also can grant permission for people who can state the reasons why they're making the petition. There are also other emergency protective orders that can be sought on behalf of the person. There can be injunctions, there can be seizing of passports. Injunctions, number one, can prevent somebody from coming near the person who's at risk. An injunction can also be used to ensure somebody stays in a certain place. It's an order that can be quite restrictive and compelling. It can restrict the level of contact, type of contact that person receives from potential individuals who may be causing a threat to them. There are also emergency protection orders that are available, especially if it's something that needs to be done quite quickly. You might not have all of the information and evidence, but you present the risk as factually as you can. It can lead to a temporary order being put in place, and with that order will then attach a return date in which parties who are deemed the respondents come and actually give their reply to your assertive allegation or whoever's made the application. There can be orders compelling the return of somebody from another country, and we've seen cases like that happen here in the UK where somebody's gone abroad, even been forced into the ceremony, yet been able to reach out and get the order that means that they have to be returned back to the UK into a place of safety. So please do not feel that if you get wind of something like this, that there's nothing you can do. You can speak to Citizens Advice Bureau. You can go to the Law Society, look for solicitors who are specialists in family law who deal with forced marriages. You can speak to quite a number of charities that are out there who are trying to protect women and girls from forced marriages. And there are these legal provisions that can ensure, one, that you're not named. So you can apply to remain anonymous on the papers, or you can, as I say, seek the assistance of third-party organisations or individuals, and even schools, colleges, places of work can actually do these types of applications. But the most important thing is to take advice and guidance so you get it right and you protect yourself and protect the person that's at risk. And as you've heard, even if the person has left the country, there are still steps that can be taken to make sure that they are returned safely. Now, we're going to take a very short break, and when we come back, we're going to look at some other forms of harmful traditional practices. These will include FGM, breast ironing, and also religious abuse. See you after these few moments. Welcome back. Now, we touched on forced marriages before the break, and on return now I'm going to touch on the issue of honour crimes. And honour crimes are crimes which take place as a result of individuals' belief that a member or person has somehow caused disrespect to their family or to their clan or themselves directly. We see this quite often in cases where young women are seen to have fallen out of line with traditional values or religious values, and unfortunately it leads to them having revenge or what's seen as disciplinary action taken against them, and sadly leading to their death. And obviously, when you take somebody's life, it is a serious criminal offence. Whether it's because you were misguided, fueled with rage, those may lead to mitigation. But quite frankly, you will be guilty of murder or manslaughter, depending on what exactly has taken place. If somebody does not suffer fatally as a result of the action and they suffer harm, then it could be deemed as a hate crime. It could also be deemed as assault or grievous bodily harm, depending on the severity of the injury that's caused. Again, the individual that takes the life is not the only person who's at risk of facing criminal sanction, but individuals who also facilitate, assist, or withhold evidence, again, face a range of criminal sanctions. And so it's very important that rather than assist a perpetrator, that you definitely try to protect the victim. And whether you feel the right or wrong in what that individual has done, nobody deserves to have their life taken because they want to act in an independent fashion. Whether you feel personally aggrieved, that's your life. That person has a right to their own. Now, we're going to talk about another harmful traditional practice, and it's one known as breast ironing. People will say, breast what? And I'll say breast ironing. And it's the act where young women and prepubescent girls are made to either have flat irons put on their breasts or have their breasts bound down to try and give a sense of purity. And also, historically, some particular tribes and cultures did it to try and hide the fact that they were actually girls, trying to make sure that they were not targeted by males. There are different reasons why certain cultures carried out this practice, but the fact is it is an offence against the person. For you to try and stem somebody's natural growth for whatever reason is actually a harmful practice, and it could be seen as an offence against the child. Obviously, it's something that causes that child a risk of harm, not just physically, but also emotionally. So you could be committing a criminal offence as an offence against the person, but also leaving yourself open to sanction for the offences under the Children's Act that you'll be causing. What can you do if you know that somebody is actually doing this to a prepubescent girl? You should be reporting them. Even though there's no specific offence in law for the act of breast ironing, as I've stated, there are the offences against the person and the breaches of the Children Act that will be taking place if somebody is actually doing that. So you should be reporting to social services, to the police. And once again, if you are not sure, you are concerned, but you don't have that factual proof, it's better to make a report and be proven wrong rather than say nothing and then somebody comes to serious harm. It's okay to make a report and be proven wrong. I will give you that assurance that if you feel somebody's at risk, it's always better to say something. There's nothing like having the regret of saying nothing. So be encouraged to speak up, speak out, go to the right organisations, outline that you're not sure, but you suspect this and why you have your suspicions. Now, we're going to be looking at FGM. What is FGM? Female genitalia mutilation. Or is it FGC? Female genitalia circumcision cutting. Now, there are debates in the community depending what region you're from, what it should be called, but the fact is I call it FGM because I consider the acts that it describes as mutilation. And it's any act that leads to the distortion of a woman's genitalia that is done without medical reason. And you'll say to me, why? Why would women or why would anybody do this to girls? The fact is, again, the misconceptions around it, it's not because of religion, it's not because of any particular virtue, it's not because of it's not even assigned to any particular region in the world. We have different organizations that speak out about FGM, and to be quite frank, there's over 40 countries where this takes place, from Iran to South America to the Africas, even in India, this practice takes place. And it's done covertly, usually done by other women against younger women. But it's not restricted to only taking place against children. FGM actually does happen to mature adult women, and it's also done more than once in some cultures. And it is indeed a criminal offence in the UK. So you can't say it's part of your private life, it's tradition, it's culture, it's my human rights. No. Some people sort of say, well, if you can put studs and pierce certain parts of your body, including your genitalia, or you can go for plastic surgery to have the area augmented, tightened, etc., why would you now criticize people who cut that particular area for cultural reasons? And it all boils down to consent. A woman over the age of 18 may consent to having certain augmentation done to her body. But in law, anybody who seeks to cut or cuts a child under the age of 16 is committing a criminal offence. And anybody who facilitates a child to cut herself, or not even cut herself, who encourages a child to distort that part of her genitalia or manipulate it in any way that is non-medical, is actually also committing a criminal offence. There are 4 types of FGM that are commonly known, and it all stems from various types of cutting. However, the 4th type of FGM is an all-inclusive type that encourages any type of augmentation or distortion for non-medical reasons that is not as described from type 1 to 3 to be included there. Some people do feel that clitoral elongation should have its own section, but others also put it in with the type 4. And that's a common practice that's done in the sub-Saharan region of Africa, in which young girls are encouraged to manipulate their clitoris and the skin around there to make sure it's elongated, and it's done by encouraging them to pull. Regardless of the fact that it's illegal in the UK, even if this particular act of FGM, FGC, whatever you want to call it, it's done illegally outside of the UK by anybody who's habitually resident in the UK, they will still fall foul of UK sanction. What can you do if you feel a girl or a woman is at risk of FGM? Well, you can seek an FGM protection order, and what that means is you can apply to court, similarly as done in the area of forced marriage, but with the FGM protection order, it's very specific to this act or preventing the risk of FGM happening. It's very flexible. It can be done again without notice, with an interim order in place, and then parties are able to return back to court to reply to the allegations and the suspicions. Some of the problems with the FGM protection orders is people who are falsely accused don't automatically have a right to legal aid. So that's also caused a lot of problems in the community. Many people feel that they're stereotyped and they are basically profiled, especially women who come from the Horn of Africa, that feel that, look, you know, historically it was done, my family doesn't do it, why are you putting down that because we're going to Dubai or we're going on holiday, that my child is at risk? Why have I been slapped with this order, kind of thing? And the fact is, if you are given an interim injunction preventing you from taking your child out of the country or to surrender your passport, the first thing I would say is check whether you do have an expert in your area, because if you want to reply to any challenges and you are innocent, you want to make sure that you have proper and robust representation. Secondly, you do have to see if you're eligible for funding. I would say if your family's income is high and you are not able to access legal aid, and most people are not, sadly, you can ask the local authority that's accusing you to pay for your representation so that there's parity of justice and parity of representation before the court. You can also ask the judge to make such a decision that they make a contribution towards your legal costs, because we've had experience, especially in my practice, of representing people who are actually quite innocent, and it's just that the suspicion that has been laid has been actually, I would say, misguided. And that was really at the beginning when this legislation came into place. Right now, a lot of local authorities are a lot more experienced, know how to assess information and evidence better. So that shouldn't happen as often as it did back then, but now there are a few more experts, few more resources out there so that people can make and evaluate decisions better and assess risk better. So again, if you have the need to make the complaint, once again, you can do it anonymously. You can go through an organisation, you can go through the child's school, local authority, a club that the child attends, or if it's an adult woman, again, you can go through an organisation, charity, speak to Citizens Advice Bureau, or again, report to the police. There is also an obligation for professionals who see these harmful traditional practices to make reports. So that includes teachers, social workers, police officers, doctors and nurses. And within their own professions, there is very detailed guidance on recording and reporting, especially with FGM. And why should we continue to record and report? For example, some people say FGM is not prevalent in the UK. It only happens back in home countries, and it was historic. People are not doing it now. If I was to tell you that it's actually so prevalent that over 16,000 girls are at risk, and that in some local authorities, almost 50% of women are presenting at maternity units with having had FGM done. So that's especially in London. London's one of the highest prevalent areas. Then you go into areas like Birmingham, where it's also quite prevalent. Parts of North London, parts of East London have very, very high statistics, which confirms that not only are women presenting with having had FGM done, but it also means that certain people around them may still be at risk if that is still happening. The other thing I was going to say is these practices, they're not considered legal if they're done in clinical environments. So even if you think, okay, it's part of my culture, I'm having pressure from family, let me go to a clinic in Egypt, in South America and get the procedure done. No. You will still fall foul of the UK law if that takes place. And I would urge you to definitely get really clued up, because the side effects, the harmful side effects of these acts are quite severe. It can cause death, hemorrhaging, it can cause paralysis, it can cause repeated urinary infections, fistulas, risk to unborn children, infertility, pain, chronic pain, and most certainly emotional harm. So if you have any issues around these topics I've discussed today, what I would suggest you do is, first of all, don't stay quiet. Definitely reach out for help. There are a number of organisations around the UK that make sure that anybody who's at risk from harmful traditional practices can seek help, have support, and also have protection. So if you have any further questions on this, feel free to email me. We're happy to have detailed confidential conversations with you and give you advice, whether you are a potential victim or somebody who's hoping or needing to make a report. So thank you for listening to me today. I'll see you next week, and remember, be good. And if you can't be good, be very, very careful. But remember, speak out. If you see something, please say something. Thank you.